Right, so let's pick up from where we left off last time, which hopefully should be a blank white image. There we go. So we have this that's drawing. Why can't we see our grid? There we go, it's just on the wrong layer. So the only change that has been made since I stopped recording the last video is I switched my grid from Polygon to Bezier. Just be careful, this has been crashing, like Touchdesigner fatally erroring. And that allows us to, it means that when we drag it, we don't get that sharp edge anymore. Let's see if I can get away with it. So if I disconnect it, change it to Polygon, and reconnect it. What you should see is if I bring this, we get basically it's the pixels are moved directly in correlation to the they're on a rigid axis. So it means that we get this sort of result. Whereas if I disconnect this, change it back to a bezier, I'm changing and disconnecting it because it seems to, when it's connected, it seems to crash it. But now if we have a look at the result, we can see we get a much more natural pull across a range of pixels. And that's purely just because the way Bezier is, it has more, it just has more points, so it pulls in a more natural curved grid than a rigid left-right grid, or XY grid I should say. So run the script, that's fine. What we're actually going to do is get back on track with what the original idea was, and that was, if we bring back Master Paint, that was that we have our image to be projected and our mask come together. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I think what we should do is, it should now be our projected image goes into our masker or our warper. So basically this will give you super fine control. Say if we were using Cam Snapper and it just doesn't quite add up, we could use this to super finely adjust the image. I then want it to go into a mask so I can say what to show and not show. And then I want it to go to our projector. And instead of proj, this should probably be source. Oh, a different pen type. There you go. So we've got our source goes into our warper, and then our warper goes into our mask, and our mask goes into our projector. So I think I can use what I've made already. This is basically a good masker. So we should probably, this is technically compartmentalized here, but I think a bunch of our options should be instead, oh, it is using in. Yeah, I think I did that at the end of last video, didn't I? I swapped it so that it was using the sources, that whatever was coming in as the aspect ratio for our controller. Is our camera doing the same thing? View, ortho, into aspect ratio. Perfect. Okay, so I think what we want to happen here is we want to save as custom talks, and then I'm going to go to my profile, Touchdesigner, projection masker, and then I'm going to do warper, bezier, warp, talks. I'm going to delete my project, and I'm going to actually drag and drop that in. I linked to Dropbox, so it should load the right file. Drag and drop that in. And there we go. So it creates the right controller, and if we activate it, we should be able to then make adjustments. Perfect. Let's add a reset button, so something that reruns our grid here. So we're going to do button Momentary. I'm going to go down to my panel just so I can see it. Probably don't want to be Bez warp. Just to all. So in here we want a button that that is Momentary. Let's make it a bit longer and taller. So I'm just putting it into full screen to see what it looks like. So probably don't want to be anywhere near as tall. Let's do 25. Add this to a null. Change this to reset grid. Can we see it? Yes, we can. Can we still? Okay, so I mean that's probably a bit dangerous being that close to that button. So let's move the button down slightly so there is no confusion. And then we want to chop execute this, reset grid, and then we do off to on, operator reset grid dot run. Perfect. I would really love it if I could view less of the grid as well, because it doesn't, is it lining up properly? So these points are definitely correct, but I'm not sure about these points. They don't seem to be sitting in quite the right position, and I wonder why. Maybe it's fine. We can come back and deal with that later if we need to. We're just fiddling for no reason. Okay, so now we have the reset button. What we want to do is basically, I'm going to resave this. So save as custom component, save, replace. We want it to, let me play some music. We want it so that we don't really want to manipulate the inner points. We just want to control this outer edge of the rectangle and allow us to sort of drag and drop where a shape is or isn't. Just wondering if this is actually the right method or not, and it's been a 2-day waste. Well, not a waste, but a learning experience is a learning experience. But so essentially what we want to have is we have an image that's 100%. It then goes through basically a ramp. So it would be fading from white to black on this edge wherever it is dictated by a user. And then we want some sort of slider that allows us to control that level of ramp. So the smaller, the lower the value, the tighter the edge, the looser, the more feathered. And then that goes into projector. Or more, this is a comp, multiply. So we take the original image, apply it by the white alpha mask that has a feather on it, and then that's sent to projector. So basically we can mask up parts that we don't want. How can we do that? So I think what we want to do is change the type of graph or the type of grid that we're using here. So I'm going to save this as a different file. I'm going to call this masker instead. And I don't think I want to use a grid as my initial. I think I actually want to do a rectangle. If we look at the operator snippets, they have a really good example under, oh, I already have it open. Never mind. Under refine, is it refine? No, I want resample. So resample takes the input geometry. If you lock it to the polygon edge, as long as you put a polygon in, it'll allow you to generate multiple points along the edge. What are we seeing here? Just the points in wireframe mode. Or is this a font? But I think if we do that, so if we were to swap this for our rectangle, again, it's 1 by 1, plug that in. Basically, we get a massive keystoner here. Right, so if you don't know what a keystoner is, it allows you to move the shape of a rectangle. But if we were to insert a resample, as we just saw there, lock it to the edge, and I'm going to look at my DAT2 here to see the points appear. Maximum segment length. Okay, that's slightly too many. Let's have a look at the resample operator again. This example resamples input geometry with a maximum length segment of 0.1. I'm going to, I think the DAT2 might be having point issues. So if I do that to 0.1, might be good. Yeah, it's just because the DAT2 isn't sampling the right object yet. So now if we do that and run it, you'll see that they are evenly spaced. And what do we have? 40 points. I think this might be slightly closer to what we want. I want to clean up the grid slightly because I don't want to see all this junk in the middle. So I think what I actually want to do is put a wireframe in here. The only problem with that is it now removes my image altogether because it can't contain a shape. This is a cool effect. Right, okay, so a wireframe obviously isn't the right solution. We don't want to see all of this junk in the middle. It's not. Whoa. That's trippy. Because it's not creating the effect that we want at the moment. Okay, so I've got my rectangle, I've got the right amount of points. It's just then, how do I do anything with those points? The way it is basically altering the geometry is messing with it. That's because actually we don't want to be messing with the geometry at all. We want our geometry to come in and then be multiplied by the mask. So we want to make let's make a constant for now that is the same as operator in one dot aspect width. That's what's going to be our material. So maybe this will work. I've just been looking at it the wrong way. Because I don't even think we need to see the grid. We basically just are making a mask. So this is going to be our mask. So it comes in, we multiply it by the same as our scalar. It is then applied as a texture. And then what comes out, it'll have a separate render because it will be just the geometry we want is the output from that. We want to comp it. Oh, there's already a comp there. So there you go. You can see if I drag that in, it masks out our image properly. Okay. Interesting. We want to be able to see the reveal of the original image underneath, so we're going to make a new. We're going to do mask wireframe. So we want to introduce one that's not being manipulated by a grid, but is still visible. So I'm just going to add a I just make a blank rectangle, plug that in, push it behind our white, give it a new constant, call it image, apply our image to it. Now I should be able to see what we aren't hiding. So if I was to mask the edge of our banana, should now be hiding the outside edge. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Only thing is that our mask currently is not scaled to the right size, so I'm going to make a second camera, and ortho is aspect width. If we do times 1.1, 0.9, should fit perfectly, and then we use that for our render instead. And it just means now that so everything is still right. It just means in our viewer it's scaled down by 0.9 and then rescaled back up to the correct size. I don't think it's causing an issue. Let's change the alpha on this slightly. That won't work. Maybe if we apply transparency, no reason. Right. So we have our masker. This is correct. I don't need to be drawing this point at all anymore. But I need to add a slider. That controls our mask amount. So 105 by 25, 105. its value in its text. So if we do text and then me.panel.par, that is definitely not a value that you can use. How do you get the panel class? Right, okay, operator, panel 1, v1. Touchdesigner, Python round float value to 2 decimal points. Again, just messing around for no reason here. Okay, no. And we want this slider to control the amount of ramp on it. Okay, so we've got our slider and we want to directly link this to something that blurs the edge on our image. And I use the word blur because that's what I'm going to do. We could probably write a shader, but I don't want to use all the time going and finding out how to do that. So let's see if we can do it with a blur. So when we look at the parameters for blur, pre-shrink is going to lower the resolution of the entire screen if you're doing super high performance hitting blurs. So if you had like a filter size that was 100, that's really going to hit your performance. So you can pre-shrink your frame, but it lowers the resolution. So I'm just trying to see if I can show you. So there you go. With a filter size of 0 and a pre-shrink of 1, you can see it really aliases, whereas you decrease the pre-shrink and you get your full resolution image. So we'll probably keep pre-shrink low and turn up our filter size. We probably... I'm not actually sure what type of blur we want to use either, so let's have a look at the reference. Method type. A spline approximate to a Gaussian kernel gives shape, texture, more accurate edges. So we're probably just going to use a cat ROM or a cat ROM or a Gaussian blur here, just so we get a nice edge on it. Mark blur in pixels. So we probably want to set this. We do cat roll. Gaussian. I think I just prefer the look on a Gaussian blur. So, and we probably want this to just be so blur. So we would make this the simple sample size. Let's do something like operator blur V1 times 100. That might be a bit aggressive, because I mean that's probably the biggest stage we want to go to, but let's have a look at what we can do. So I'm going to reset to our mask. I'm going to attach a null and view that. That is not the right thing we are seeing. And our panel view is to be null 3. There we go, we can visualize that. So now if we were to use this, we could bring in the blur that we want. And we could increase the amount slightly. Now I'll show you the result. So one thing I would say is this really clearly is a rectangle that has hard edges. So I'm wondering if we can convert it to a Bezier surface. Can we do it with a grid? Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, let's stick with the rectangle. Rerun the script. Maybe we just need to increase our sampling. I think this works. You just need to be careful when you build the edge. Is our blur good though? That's the question. I think it is way too aggressive when it gets up to the higher end. Okay, I'm going to leave the sample size to 1. I'm going to hold at the edge so the basically blur stops whenever it gets to an edge. I think that is it's good enough. I mean, I'd need to use it in setting for projection mapping, but I think it'll do what we need it to. And there you go, you can we can start masking out the edge using the points. I like that, I think it's good. And then we could send that to the projector. That's essentially the entire goal of that. Okay, so let's save component talks, masker, save, done, and there we go. So now we have a build where we can take a source image. Let's do our count. We can apply it to a keystone, which we can then apply to our warper, Bezier warp, and then apply to our masker. So now if we connect our null up here, it's pretty wild, but we can activate, keystone it into a strange position. We could then warp that whole image if we needed to. So one thing I would note is I've actually got the wrong image coming out of each of these because they still have points present, which they shouldn't. You can still see the grid from one another. But then we can mask it out. So now if I was to, if I reset all of these, go inside here, just copy what I've got inside my masker. Oh, if I could see anything. So we have a separate camera render. Just take that. Don't need our mouse position. And camera, we just go to negative, so we do times 1.1. No? That is right, yeah. And that should be it. So that should be a full scale image being output from that. Finally, in our keystone, again, we don't need our dot. Insert our camera. Delete our blur. And we literally just want our output geometry. So now if I was to go up to our keystone and warp it, you can see the image we get out is the image that we want to keep. Brilliant. There's probably a little problem with the geometry there, you can see when it's warping, but for now I'm happy with that. So I'm going to save component talks as keystone, replace. Save component talks as Bezier warp, replace. And finally, save component talks as masker with a capital M. Let's do, let's be official. Save. Done. Okay. Why are we still seeing our grid in the output here? We want to put that to a null instead. Output. Output, delete out. There we go. Save component talks, keystone, replace. Save component talks, bez warp. Save component talks, mask. Okay, brilliant. And that is us done. So I may pick this up while I make some changes, but it does everything that I need it to for now. And in theory, no matter which image I give it, should automatically adjust. So we can keystone it and then warp it. Background image here is what is controlling the warp. And then mask its edge out. Brilliant, and I'll end this video series.